Hello, everyone. We are excited to talk to everybody today about grow room controls. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your very busy schedule to learn a bit with us. I am here, Kelly Nicholson, with my coworker, Kevin Blackmore. Let's get started.
So just a little bit of background about ourselves. My co-presenter is Kelly Nicholson. She's our sales director for Controlled Environment Agriculture. She's got a Bachelor of Arts in Communication. She's spent over 18 years in the hydroponics industry, serving small home gardeners all the way up to large multi-acre farms. She's done lots of on-site training and installations throughout the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, so she's pretty international.
And a little bit about Kevin Blackmore. He is our current product manager. He has a Master of Engineering Studies from Auckland University of Technology. He's got 19 years with Autogrow, just beating me by one, of course. He's been our design engineer, the R&D manager, and our product manager. He was also the lead designer of the IntelliDose IntelliClimate product range, as well as our multi-grow. So who is Autogrow? So Autogrow was established in 1994, and we're committed to creating original ideas for agriculture and making them a reality. We have a global headquarters in Auckland, New Zealand, and an office in California, and growers and resellers in over 40 countries. Autogrow provides affordable, accessible, and easy-to-use innovation 24/7 anywhere in the world.
So we at Autogrow are trying to leverage the power of technology, the data science, and the plant biology, using our team of software designers, engineers, crop science experts. We're trying to push the innovation boundaries to get better results, the best results for you guys, the growers.
So let's get into this. Let's start talking about grow room controls.
So before we start, if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them out in the questions box, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar where we get to the questions time.
Yeah, we're gonna be kind of doing an overview, but if you need anything more specific, please put it in the questions box. So, what is grow room control? We want to define what we consider to be indoor growing. So, the practice of producing food and medicine within a structure, such as a warehouse, a shipping container, a garage, a room, any type of closed loop system that uses artificial light, CO2, and HVAC, which stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Yeah, and so those are the two major drivers for us defining whether it's an indoor or another type of growing operation, the closed loop system and the artificial lighting. So to automate an indoor grow room, what we're trying to do is regulate the operation of the different conditions, so the light, the CO2, the heating, the ventilation. And what we'll do is we'll use a sensing device to compare the measurements with what you want it to have, what we call the target state. So if the temperature is a little bit too low, we might turn on the heater. If it gets a little too high, we'll turn on the cooling. Similar with the CO2 and the lighting, we can do it all to a schedule. And that's what we talk about when we're talking about automation of an indoor environment.
So, what is the environment? So, there's two types of environments. And the first one is your aerial environment. So, this is where we're discussing lighting. So, we know that all plants need light to photosynthesize, which they need to, they have to do that process to grow. So, lighting is important. Also, the temperature and the humidity in the growing environment are very important. And depending on the type of plant you're growing, these can vary greatly on what your proper temperature and humidity set points are. And we're also talking about CO2. Plants need CO2. And depending on the size of the grow room that you have, there's different ways to do CO2, but it is a necessity.
Another aspect to plants that people often forget about is the root zone. Plants are exposed to two different types of environments. There's the aerial, and then there's their roots. And in the root zone, that's where we talk about things like irrigation, where we're delivering water to the plants at the right amounts at the right times, the EC or the nutrient levels, the pH balance, measuring things like the moisture levels so we know exactly how much moisture is around the roots. And something that a lot of people forget about is the temperature of the water that you're delivering to the root zone. That's something, if the water temperature gets too hot, the oxygen level will drop, and that can become a breeding ground for bacteria and other funguses and things like that.
Yeah, and for a lot of plants, especially if you're the type of growing that you're doing, like in an NFT hydroponic system, the root zone is actually almost more important even than the environment around it. As long as the roots have a lot of oxygen and the water temperature is appropriate, the plant itself can actually handle, big changes in temperature, for example. So the root zone is very, very important when you're considering the different environments. So what can be automated? So aerial in the environment, you can automate intake and exhaust fans as well as airflow fans, all different types of lighting, your air conditioners, heaters, dehumidifiers, humidifiers, CO2 injection, CO2 extraction, as well as foggers.
The other area is the root zone, and what we're talking about there is management of the nutrient. We'll be using dosing valves or peristaltic pumps to deliver nutrients or acid or alkali to manage a pH. Operation of the irrigation valves, where you can deliver the different feed schedules to the plants, measuring the moisture levels and controlling that. And lastly, water chillers if you're in an arid environment or a hot environment, or heaters if you're in an environment where it might get too cold.
And then on top of that, so not only you're automating the two zones, the aerial and the root zone, there's also the management of that. So when you have full automation, you have the ability to do have features like scheduled settings. So you can actually schedule out the entire grow cycle from the beginning. And so you can say, on day 4, I want to up my nutrients a bit. The plants are getting some root set in. I want to change my temperature and humidity requirements as my plants are maturing. You can actually schedule that out, which gives you a lot of control. And then the other aspect of management is getting text and email alerts. So knowing immediately if something was to go outside of your set points. So if it gets too hot in the room, or your lights don't come on, or the moisture level in your media is too low, that you find out immediately, and that you can go and fix the problem before there's any loss.
Yeah, and if without automation, you might not find out that your tank's overdosed or your temperature's gotten too high till 5, 6, 10 hours later when you actually go and visit the growing site. And so having a timely alert is critical to getting really good automation in your system.
So why is it important to automate?
So with automation, most automation systems are programmable. So that means that you can customize them to the type of growing operation that you've got. The first thing that I would talk about is having time schedules for growing. That means that you're going to have, you'll be able to, if you're say growing a lettuce, you'll be able to set an EC target of zero point 0.8 on day number 4, increase it to 1 on day number 10. Similarly with the light levels and the pH levels, you can schedule out the set points in the system so you can customize it exactly to your growing environment and your needs. The other aspect to automation is those alarms. Knowing when something's gone wrong as soon as it happens is critical to making sure that you're able to respond in a timely manner. And in a lot of cases, this is the difference between saving a crop and losing a crop.
And everybody always thinks about this, but of course we're going to have a decreased labor cost when we automate. A big one is that growers report saving 2 to 4 hours a week by not having to hand dose their reservoirs. So having to go in every day with a handheld meter and monitor your EC and your pH, and then add nutrients and add pH adjusters, stir, wait, monitor, test it again. That's a very time consuming process. So if you can automate that, that's one huge aspect of labor savings. And things like automating your irrigation so that you're not hand watering anymore. All of those things are great ways to decrease labor. We're also going to increase crop yields. So if every single time the plant eats or is fed, that it gets the exact right level of EC, the pH is perfectly balanced, the water temperature is right on, and we have the perfect environment, you're going to have the healthiest plant that you can have. And healthy plants are bigger yields.
The other aspect to automation is you can avoid those costly mistakes. So anybody who's hand dosed the reservoir or hand watered their plants have had times when they've accidentally overdosed or they've accidentally over or underwatered their plants. And by automating the system, you take out that human element and you make sure that you don't have those simple mistakes where you get distracted by a text or something like that where it's easy for a human to get distracted, but an automation system's there 24/7 and you'll avoid those mistakes and mitigate all that risk.
Yes, and mitigating risk, I say it all the time, over and over and over again. It's all about lowering your risks. It is so important that when you're growing plants, you have to sell your plants to somebody, right? So you have buyers, and you've created this relationship with them that they are expecting to have a certain amount of your product at a certain time for a certain price and at a certain quality. If you were to overdose your nutrient reservoir, for example, like Kevin said, you added your A nutrient, then you got a text, you got distracted, and you went back and couldn't remember and added more A, and then B, and now you've got a balance, and all of a sudden you've got tip burn and you've got deficiencies in the plants. Now all of a sudden you can't fulfill your commitment to your buyer. And that not only hurts your personal relationship with them and your business relationship, but they could go find somebody else to purchase from. And now you've lost a customer. So it's really important. I mean, that's kind of a long-term way of thinking about it, but the automation will allow for you to know immediately if there's a problem and be able to fix it before you have any crop loss. So what specifically is indoor automation? Once again, guys, I'm just going to remind you, if you have any questions, because we're talking about a lot of different things here, please go ahead and put them into the questions box on the GoToWebinar panel, and we will get to them at the end. So automating your watering system.
So the first thing you'll need to think about when you're automating your watering system is nutrient management. That's delivering the nutrients to your plants at the right levels at the right time. So monitoring the electrical conductivity, which is a way to measure how much nutrient is in your water, and the pH balance of the water you're supplying is really important. The system will monitor those, add your nutrient or your pH down, pH up as appropriate, and keep it perfect 24/7 to achieve the set points that you need.
Yeah, and then there's the root zone. As we keep saying, root zones are very important, but monitoring the moisture levels, the temperature and the EC of the root zone is critical, especially if you're growing in a substrate, a rock wool block. It's important to know how moist that cube actually is so that we're watering the plants just when they need it. So we're not overwatering them or underwatering them. It's also important to know what the EC at the root zone is. It helps us make decisions on what the EC of the reservoir would be that we're feeding into the plants. We can also monitor the runoff. So all of this information, all of this data gives you the ability to feed the plants exactly what they want, when they want it, however often they need it. So healthy root zones, healthy plants, higher crops, higher crop yields.
And the last aspect of automating the watering part of your system is irrigation. A lot of systems will be running supplying water to the plants 24/7, and so there's little need for a watering automation. But a lot of them, if you're growing in a media, you'll need to have some type of irrigation scheduler. With the better automation systems, you're able to provide multiple triggers for irrigation. So you might be triggering based on the time of your day, measuring the moisture levels within the root zone. So you're giving the plants exactly what they need when they need them, measuring the light levels and accumulating that across the day. So having a system that's flexible and can maintain the irrigation schedule, give them the right amount of water at the right time, is really critical to having a well-automated watering system for your plants.
Yeah, growers that we have currently who have been hand watering or watering off the time of day in media and are now using the moisture level to trigger irrigations are just blown away by the difference in their plants. The plants will tell you exactly when they need it. You know, as plants grow, they transpire at different rates. So a younger plant may need to be watered less often, a larger plant more often, and so this gives you that level of control. So what goes into aerial automation? The environment.
So the first aspect, and one that is often forgotten about, is the fans. So we talk about two different types of fans with aerial automation. The first is what we call a horizontal airflow fan or a HAF fan. This type of fan is used to circulate the air within the room and just make sure you've got a good, even environment around the plants 24/7, every day of the week. A lot of installations don't automate the HAF fans. They just run them all the time to make sure they get a lot of good stirring inside the environment. But we've had growers who will report pulsing the fans can help as well. The other type of fan automation you might put into the system, into your installation, is an extraction fan. Extraction fan will essentially swap the air within your growing environment with the air from outside the environment, and you can trigger that for a number of different reasons: temperature control, nighttime air exchange, or daytime air exchange if you're trying to boost the CO2 with the ambient outside. And an area that a lot of people don't think about is emergency evacuation for, say, CO2 alarms, which is a regulatory thing that you might find in certain states. Over temperature alarms, say if the HVAC system has fallen over and you need to try and get the air out of that place really quickly. And those are areas where automation fans it can become really important.
Yeah, and then, so if we're not, some indoor growing operations are what we call closed systems, which means that we don't allow any air from in outside of the growing environment. In that system, it is absolutely a requirement that you have an HVAC system. There's heating in grow rooms is kind of an interesting thing because indoors, of course, we have to have lights, and lights usually create a lot of heat. So the biggest issue for most indoor growers is getting rid of as much heat as they can. So they're running very large air conditioning units. But if you are in your seedling starts or your vegetative phase, and you're using, let's say, like LED lights that don't put off a ton of heat, you may actually find that it gets kind of cold. It's also important to have heating available at night, especially if you're in a colder climate, because the minute that those lights go off, that room cools down very quickly, and you may need to actually use heating to actually ramp that cool down so there's not such a shock to the plants. So using an HVAC system, you have the heating, you have the ventilation, which just is more airflow. You can never have enough airflow. It's imperative in indoor gardening that you have lots of airflow, and then air conditioning to keep it cool.
The last aspect of aerial automation you want to automate is the humidity management. So plants transpire a lot, and that means that they put in more vapor to the air than humans will typically generate. And so you'll need to talk with your HVAC suppliers about having a bigger condenser to try and manage that vapor level. And on humidity management, there are different aspects, as Kelly sort of pointed on. When you turn on the lights, essentially what it'll usually do is heat up the growing environment, dry it out a little bit, and so you may need a high pressure fogging system or some type of humidification method to bring the humidity up to keep the plants at a comfortable level. On the other side of things, when you turn all those lights off and the room is cooled down, you may end up with a humidity buildup. And so in those cases, you might need an automated dehumidifier, or if you've got a HVAC system, you might be able to pulse that, run it so that the condensers are sort of dehumidifying as well.
So the other aspects of the indoor automation, of course, we have artificial lighting. We're inside. We have to, offer light up to the plants so that they can grow. So the two most popular, for the last 30, 40 years of indoor growing type of lighting is going to be your high pressure sodium and your metal halide. So HPS bulbs glow kind of an orange color like the old school street lights. And they put out a lot of heat, which the plants actually like. They actually like that kind of heat. And it's this color spectrum that's fantastic for flowering. The metal halide, on the other hand, is a bright white light with a slight blue tint, kind of like an aquarium lighting. And that's more for your vegetative growth. So a lot of growers will start with metal halide bulbs for their vegetative growth and then switch into high pressure sodium when they actually want the plants to flower.
And the other type of lighting, anybody who's done any research into indoor automation or of a growing environment will know about LEDs. LEDs are probably the future of lighting for operations. But typically at the moment we see them mostly used in vegetative growth. So where you're growing a leafy green crop or your lettuces, tomatoes, similar to the picture on the right, you'll typically go with the LED lights because they use less energy, they don't get as hot. But we don't see a lot of use of them in a fruiting or a flowering crop, but there's a lot of research going into that area. So keep looking in that space because you'll see the LEDs starting to push into there. A fourth type of light is something simple like a T5 fluorescent. You can use these in a plant starts where you've got clones or seeds. And this is a type of plant, it's a growth stage where the plants aren't requiring the energy from the light. We're just using the light more to trigger them.
Yeah, and T5s are fantastic because they're really an inexpensive way to get your seedlings started. So those are fairly popular. The other that we talked on a little bit before was CO2. So CO2 is really important for plants. Depending on the size of your growing operation, there's different ways to inject CO2 into the room. So the first one is propane burners. So for very large warehouses where you've got, whether it's multiple rooms or just one large room, like in this picture on the right, they'll usually have a huge propane tank outside of their facility that the local gas company comes and fills on a regular basis. And they'll have burners in each of the rooms, and they'll be set up to be able to trigger whenever the CO2 levels go below set points and to run until your CO2 levels get to the appropriate point. The other, for smaller kind of situations, if you're just in a single, let's say like you're in a garage or you're in a shipping container, just a smaller situation, you may just use tanks. So the same gas company you can go to and pick up a 20-gallon or a 50-gallon tank of CO2 and attach a solenoid to it that will be triggered by your automation system whenever CO2 is necessary.
And the last type of CO2 control for or automation is not on the list, but it's basically using an air exchange to bring in the ambient CO2 levels from outside the growing operation inside, because the plants will consume the CO2 and start starving if you seal them off. And so having a periodic air exchange, you can exchange the consumed CO2 inside the environment with the ambient 400 ppm from outside and keep the plants fed. And the last point on the propane burners is if you are looking at putting propane burners in there, it's important to talk about it with your cooling specialists, because a propane burner will actually add a lot of heat to the operation, and you need to make sure you've got the capacity to manage it.
So everybody wants to know, what's the return on investment? Because there's obviously an investment when you're going to go to automation. So the first one is your time. So on average, like I said earlier, growers are saving 2 to 4 hours a week just in managing their reservoirs. If you have growers who are growing plants in a substrate and are still hand watering, automatically or automating your irrigation can save hours and hours and hours a day. It's important to manage, the labor savings, versus the plant health also. So, having that time that your grower was out there actually trying to hand water, instead of that, he's actually working on the plants. That's just a much better use of labor.
Another area where you get a good return on investment in automating an indoor operation is the energy consumption. So by utilizing all the aspects of your controller, you can save time and energy. And one of the benefits of an indoor operation as compared to an outdoor operation where they might have supplemental lighting is you can control when the day starts, because you're artificially lighting the environment. So you can turn your lights on when you're not at peak power rates, and you can save a lot more compared to somebody whose timing is determined by the sunrise and the sunset.
Yeah, and there's also, the other aspect of your energy savings is that, for example, running a CO2 propane burner isn't a huge energy expense, but the CO2 itself is. So actually burning the propane and having that whole process happen, if you were to run all of your CO2 and then immediately turn on an exhaust fan because it was a little bit warm in the room, you just dump all of that CO2 outside. So it was of no use. So having automation that makes sure that we know how long it takes for the CO2 to be utilized by the plants, and to not turn on fans until that time has passed, and to manage your temperature properly, it is a huge energy savings. And it's just an overall, cost of doing business savings, that we don't make any waste. So money wise, the savings, labor savings, also just a reduction in crop loss. The ability to know immediately if something goes wrong will help you reduce your crop loss.
Yeah, and having your growers focus on the plants means that they're going to be more in tune with what stages the plants are at, and they'll pick up early signs much easier than if they're having to water 2 to 4 hours a week or what have you. Another aspect where you get a good return on investment is the ability to compare across growing seasons and do a little bit of experimentation. So with a full data logging system and access to some analytical tools, you'll be able to compare one growing season to the next, compare what things you did differently, try and figure out where the advantages are, what the benefits were between the two seasons, and then the next one, you'll be able to apply the learnings and make your growing approach more data driven.
And there's always, and just peace of mind, being able to remotely access your indoor growing operation so that you can log in from anywhere in the world, see that everything's working appropriately, check all of your readings, make sure that your temperatures and humidities are doing what you want them to do, make sure that your EC and pH in your reservoir is fine, the moisture levels in your media are correct. The remote access is amazing. And then also getting text and email alerts. So without a sophisticated automation system, you won't get an alert if something goes wrong. And if something was to go outside of one of your set points, you want to know immediately so that you can either get yourself or one of your workers down to the growing facility, figure out what happened, and fix it.
Yeah, knowing immediately when pump stops running, that's critical to saving the crop. So if you've got an NFT system or a deep water culture system and the pump stops, you have minutes, maybe up to an hour to get in there. Your crop is affected detrimentally.
So now everybody always wants to know, so how much is this actually going to cost? Because it all sounds awesome, right? But what is it going to cost me? So we're just going to talk about the Autogrow product line here so that we can give you kind of an idea about what Autogrow can do. So we're going to start with the mini dosers. So the mini dosers are really simplistic automation, but they're just workhorses. So the EC Mini monitors your EC and add more nutrients as necessary. So if you set it to a 1.8 EC, it goes down to 1.6. It adds more nutrients and it just keeps it right at the set point. Same with the pH, lowers your pH anytime that your pH raises, or vice versa, can rise your pH if your pH is too low. Now, these units don't have the remote access and the text and the email alerts, but they are a really nice entry level automation. They go for around $500 to $600 a piece.
Yeah, as Kelly said, the mini doses are essentially only do one thing. They'll do the EC control or the pH control. If you want to step up to the next level where we talk about a single function controller, things like the IntelliDose and the IntelliClimate, the IntelliDose can manage both the EC and the pH at the same time, along with the more advanced features, say as data logging, remote access, and these are customizable with the time schedule. So an IntelliDose can do up to 9 parts with the of dosing. They're sister products, so they work in combination with each other. And with that remote access, it means you're able to get those alerts and that flexibility that allows you to sort of step away from the everyday drudgery of growing and start focusing on the plants and become more data driven. These go for around about $2,000 a piece. They're sister products. So if you have an IntelliDose and IntelliClimate, you're able to manage pretty much all the different aspects of the root zone and the climate aspects of your growing operation.
And then when we kind of step up to a little even more of a more commercial grade kind of control, we have the AFEA, which is a single zone controller that can manage, once again, your reservoirs and your environment. And it also can manage multiple irrigations and trigger off of moisture levels. So you have just a few more kind of advanced features on the AFEA than just the IntelliDose and the IntelliClimate together.
And the ultimate level is when you're talking about multi-zone control. So if you've got multiple rooms with multiple different irrigation techniques and systems, that's when you want to step up to what we call our multi-grow controller. So this can do everything you'll need in your operation, from HVAC control, lighting control, dosing, irrigation. We essentially custom build and configure these for every operation. So the prices vary. You only pay for what you use, but they range from 10K upwards to 20K.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Please, once again, any questions, put those in the questions field, and we'll get to those in just one second here. The biggest thing I always want to leave everybody with when we talk about automation is, yes, it's labor savings and it's really cool, but really it's all about mitigating your risk. You do not want to have crop loss, and you need to know immediately if something is going wrong, and the only way you can do that is with an advanced automation system. So you just need to make sure that, you know, when you're looking into automation, make sure that you've got this aspect covered, that you're going to know if something goes wrong so that you can fix it.
The other aspect that we talked about was labor savings, being able to focus on the plants. So by being able to step away from those drudgery roles where you're hand dosing a reservoir or having to irrigate the plants for hours in a day, in a week, you're able to focus more on the plants or reduce the amount of labor that you're having to pay for.
And then, of course, healthier crops. When a plant is in the perfect environment, and that's one of the best things about indoor agriculture and fully, completely closed systems, is that you're creating the perfect environment for that plant. You have no outside influences. So being able to create the exact temperature and humidity levels that the plant wants at that growing stage, the right amount of light that they need, the proper nutrient levels, the pH is always balanced, it irrigates just when it's needed. You'll always get healthier crops, higher yields, more money.
And the last thing, which isn't on the list, but it's really important to think about, is making sure you have a good relationship with your suppliers. So make sure you're talking to your automation specialist early, your cooling specialists, because it's a really exciting time. There's lots of new techniques and technologies being pulled into the indoor automation world at the moment. And by getting in contact with your suppliers early and making sure that you're on top of, you're able to plan your system properly, you'll be able to ensure that you get the right environment for your plants.
Yeah, and I'm just to add to that a bit, make sure that you're dealing with people who understand what indoor agriculture is, because we've had some situations where, sizing out an HVAC system, for example. If you have a 10,000 square foot building and you're putting offices in and you have humans working in there, that's a very different HVAC requirement than a 10,000 square foot building with 500,000 watt lights in it. and trying to grow plants with lots of humidity. So it's just important that when you're working with your different partners, make sure that they truly understand what indoor agriculture, requirements are going to be. So we are going to have another webinar in a month on March 28th, and we're going to go into advanced grow room systems. I'm really excited about this one, guys, because we're going to get even more into some project management, kind of like project planning. We're going to talk a bit more about CO2 and lighting. And we're going to be talking, a bit more about direct type of automation, ramping features, things like that. So please keep an eye out for that invite and sign up for our next webinar. Once again, March 28th. And we'll be talking advanced grow room systems. So every grow operation is unique, and we are here to help you to make the best decisions for your growing needs. Please feel free to fill out the form at offer.autogrow.com, and one of us will reach out to you, or you can just go ahead and phone us at any time. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or autogrow.com, and you can see all of our different products. So it's question time.
So as we said before, if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box. To kick off the questioning session, I thought I'd ask a question myself. So Kelly, why would you want to automate your feed schedules?
Well, so depending on the plant that you're growing, the feed schedules can change weekly. In the very beginning, let's say, of a plant. So you may have a plant like a lettuce seed that starts, you need very little nutrients when the plant just has one or two little roots and two little, starter leaves. But as the plant grows on the 4th, 5th, 6th day, you need to up the nutrients a bit. 7th, 8th, 9th day, you need to up just a tiny bit more. And if you can automate that, you're not actually in there every day having to remember, okay, where was I yesterday? What day are we on? You can actually just tell the system, on the 7th day, I want an EC of 0.2, on the 10th day, 0.3, on the 14th day, I want, 0.4, however you want that to happen. Also, you've got different plants that have different feed requirements on a weekly basis as they get into the flowering state. So they may need more nitrogen at certain times. They're going to need more calcium at other times. So you can actually adjust your feed schedule based on the plant's requirements, and you don't have to be there for that. So if you want to go snowboarding for the weekend, for example, and you know that on Sunday morning you need to change your nutrient schedule, you can actually just pre-program that. It'll happen for you. You can log in from the slopes, see it's all good. Go enjoy your weekend.
And how would you actually add those additives to the system?
So with the IntelliDose, for example, and the multi-grow, you can manage up to a 9-part nutrient blend. So you have your A and your B nutrients are always just your standard A and B nutrients for everything. And then you can add on your different additives based on ratios. And so there's a ratio of how we keep that nutrient recipe balanced for every single time that it feeds. And these can be customized, no problem at all. Feel free, to reach out to me, and you can kind of give me an idea about which nutrients you're using, and I can help you with your schedule.
We have a question here is, what's the scope of Autogrow's supply? Project, supply, installation, commissioning, support? So Autogrow as a company, we're an automation specialist and a data specialist. So we focus on the control aspects of the plants and the management of the environment and the plants that they're in. We also do some analytics on the data that comes out. So we talk to the different suppliers, different installers to make sure that you've got the right equipment for your installation. We also assist them with the commissioning, and we provide support for all of our products.
Then we have a question here about, what type of different sensors do we deal with, and what's like the minimum level of sensing that you want for this type of automation?
So for your nutrient levels, the minimum that you want to have is you need to measure the electrical conductivity or the nutrient level, and the pH level. You want to always make sure that the water you're supplying to the plants is got the right balance, right pH balance, and the right amount of nutrients in it. When you come to the aerial aspect of it, we recommend that you measure at least the air temperature and the humidity, and similarly the CO2 if you're in a indoor growing environment, because the CO2 levels are critical, and that's where the plants will often starve in a environment where you're not managing that. Another question, is it hard to install automation?
I guess it depends on the level of automation that you're considering, but I can speak for Autogrow that no, it's not difficult to install Autogrow. We have designed these systems to be able to be installed by the grower themselves, and or possibly your electrician if you want to do that. When you start talking about the multi-grow and the larger systems, you would probably want to bring an electrician in. But the IntelliLine, the IntelliDisc, the IntelliClimate, they're not difficult to install, and most all growers can do it themselves in an afternoon.
And the another question is, do we supply sensors? With our automation systems, we supply our own sensors with them, so we can measure the air temperature, humidity, light levels, CO2, the electrical conductivity of the nutrient, the moisture levels at the root zone, pH. So yes, we supply a full range of sensors for our equipment.
Yeah, it looks like that's all of the questions that you guys have for us today. I see your note here, Harold, and I will ask Kevin to reach out to you about the Minder product. So I really appreciate everybody attending. If you have any other questions that come up down the road, please feel free to reach out, autogrow.com, or go to offer.autogrow.com and fill out the form, and one of us will be in touch. Okay, have a good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, bye.